Hey guys, this is John, and I'm playing seeuingoa in the 15-minute pool on ICC. He opens with d4. Let's play d5. This is my first game back since I've been home from the tournament, the Dayton Chess Festival. Finished with 4.5 out of 9 in that tournament, so an even score, which is right around my expectation because the average rating of the tournament and the participants was right about my rating, FIDE, which is 2449. Let's play a Semi-Slav in this case. So the benefit of playing a tournament is that you are pretty sharp after. No joke. Like whenever I play a tournament, I always feel pretty crisp with my online play. It translates pretty well. Okay, so he's playing a gambit involving g3 and bishop g2. This is a trendy line. I'm going to play knight bd7, which just discourages knight e5. I'll probably be playing b5 soon to prop up this pawn on c4. Like now would be a good time for b5. Yeah, this gambit is totally playable for white. It's received a bit of coverage lately in, I know, at least one work on the Semi-Slav, a new book by Quality Chess. And I think it's interesting. It's a pretty unexplored gambit, relatively speaking, as far as mainline d4 theory goes, and leads to rich positions. I get the sense that black should not be any worse in this gambit, but the positions are complex enough that white can just play down a pawn, and he has 2 center pawns to black's 1, and a bit of a lead in development too. I mean, all these pawn moves are time-consuming for black. Taking the pawn on c4, propping it up with b5. You can see I'm going to be lagging a bit in development. Let me check my opponent's stats real quick. So he has a peak rating of 2064 over 13,000 15-minute games played. One thing I was going to mention, ICC just introduced a new standard pool. So they have a 25 plus 10 pool now, 25 minutes with a 10-second increment, which also happens to be the FIDE time control. So I'm still undecided whether I'm going to be playing that pool because those are slightly longer games. The 15-minute games are nice and predictable for me because they usually last no more than a half hour. And with the analysis, usually I get these videos done in under 45 minutes. So the 25 plus 10 games, I may play that pool a bit. I'll kind of wait and see how it's looking, whether there's a lot of players playing. But I'm undecided if it'll be a regular thing. I also might analyze my games from the tournament that I just played. I need some time to do that, so it'll take me a while to do, but I would like to get back into analyzing my own games. I've posted a couple videos where I've done analysis of my tournament games, but I'd like to do that again. So many videos and ideas and not enough time, right? Just gotta do my best with what I can, what I have, time-wise. Okay, he's gone into the tank a little bit here. Just thinking, I mean, e4 would be a normal move, just push in the center. Because then if I get greedy after e4 and play b4, trying to drive away his knight and take e4, I'm falling even further behind in development, and I might be exposing myself to discoveries. Like, let's say e4, b4, knight a4, knight takes e4. Maybe this knight can move and his bishop will be attacking my knight. Or maybe rook e1 is also possible, again hitting the knight. What are some other ideas for white? Knight d2 is possible. I've played knight d2 in similar positions, uncovering the bishop, so threatening bishop takes c6, and also threatening knight takes b5, because notice that the c pawn would be pinned. If c takes b5, the rook on a8 would hang. So if knight d2, I would play queen b6, though, and try to hold both c6 and b5 and hit d4. So queen b6 is a tidy reply. Knight d2 is a little dubious. I mean, I wouldn't be at all upset if he played that move. Bishop g5 is another move you could think about playing here. Plays knight e5. Okay, so against this one, he brings about 2 attackers on c6, but I can play knight takes e5, d takes e5, and then either trade queens right away or play knight d5 thereafter. Let me just think about what I want to do, because if knight takes e5, almost certainly he's going to take with the pawn. Well, he will take with the pawn, not even almost certainly. It's a basic certainty. And I want to have my next move in mind against that. So knight takes e5, d takes e5. Queen takes d1 is tempting because I get a pair of pieces off the board. So let's say queen takes d1. If he plays bishop takes c6, then trying for an in-between move with check, I have queen back to d7, interestingly enough. And he's going to go down a piece. Bishop takes d7, knight takes d7. But if knight takes e5, d takes e5, queen takes d1, rook takes d1, then knight d5. Does he have anything? I like my position there. I think I'm doing pretty well. I'm going to go for that. Yeah, I mean, I have the e6 and c6 pawns that will be defending the knight on d5 nicely. I would expect him to play after d takes e5, queen takes d1, rook takes d1, knight d5, probably knight e4. So avoiding a knight trade and maybe trying to work his knight into the dark squares at some point, like d6 or maybe c5. My dark square bishop will be important because you see I have all these pawns on light squares, hence my dark squares are weak. But I'm not overly concerned, I guess, at this point. What else could he do, though? I mean, rook takes d1, knight d5, maybe knight takes d5, but then I have c takes d5, and I can straighten out my pawns. If he takes with the bishop, I'd be inclined to take with the e-pawn because I would want my c-pawn protecting the pawn on b5, is the thing. So let's say rook takes d1, knight d5, bishop takes d5, e takes d5. I mean, then I have the two bishops plus an extra pawn. He can play a move like e4, but I think his compensation should be insufficient. I mean, at the very least, I'm seeing positions where we get into like an opposite color bishop position where I still remain up a pawn. So not the end of the world. He's thinking a little bit once again. I mean, there's not a whole lot to think about, though. The knight takes d1 looks completely lame, so that's not a serious candidate move. We already described why bishop takes c6 check does not work. It's because I have queen d7 blocking. And I'll be up a piece after bishop takes d7, knight takes d7, saving the attack knight. So he has to take with a rook. Be surprised by any other move. So after rook takes d5, rook takes d1, knight d5, I also want to look at some moves like he can try to play to undermine my structure, like maybe a4 is a candidate move, attacking b5, which is a bit weak. I mean, then his knight and his pawn will be bearing down on that pawn. But I have ways I can counter that. Probably b4 is the most obvious one. So a4, b4, just push past and attack his knight. And if he takes on d5, I'm pleased to take back with the pawn. I do kind of wonder if he can ever go for an e4 plan. That's the only thing that really concerns me, like taking on d5 and then playing a quick e4. Because if white's going to have something here, it's going to be in the short term. He doesn't want to allow me to complete my development and otherwise get coordinated. Even if I had played instead of queen takes d1, knight d5 right away, I would wonder whether he could do some quick plan with involving e4, like taking once and playing e4. Maybe he could do that. Well, it looks like we're going to have a pretty big time advantage. Yeah, already coming up on a 5-minute time advantage before move 10. That's nice. I didn't have any Semi-Slav games in the Dayton tournament I just played. In the first round, I had an exchange Slav game from the black side against Grandmaster Georgiev, and I lost that game, although the opening wasn't really to blame. I think I equalized out of the opening, and we had a typical position for an exchange Slav. Maybe white had a minuscule advantage, but I didn't lose that game because of the opening. But otherwise, I faced e4 on a couple occasions, and I think, how many games? 3 games. I faced e4 from the black side, and I played e5, double king pawn in one, and I played the Scandinavian in the other 2 games. And did better with the Scandinavian. Scored 1.5 out of 2 with the Scandi, and 0 for 1 with e5. Okay, so he plays a4, and then he played it quickly too, so undermining the pawns. And I said that b4 was probably going to be my response. Note that knight takes c3 would be horrible now. In view of bishop takes c6 check, that move would be working for white at this point. Another way I could support this pawn would be like rook b8, but the problem there is he takes on b5 and uncovers his rook to attack the a7 pawn. So b4 is essentially forced right now. I'm going to play it. Now, if he doesn't want to lose steam here, I think he should take and then look to play e4, like immediately on the next move. So knight takes d5, and I might face a difficult decision which way to recapture. I'll have to give that a little thought. Maybe I can play, well, I was thinking knight takes d5, e takes d5, e4, and then bishop g4, and try to hit his rook, and try to induce f3 so I could bring my bishop back to e6. We'll look at that in the analysis. But instead he just jumps to e4 with the knight. Okay, now, do I play a move like h6, which maybe keeps a piece out of g5, or do I just continue trying to develop? I think development is in order because I am still underdeveloped here. I need to fix that problem. So light square bishop moves maybe, or maybe a5 looking to go bishop a6. Maybe bishop a6 immediately. Am I afraid of bishop e3 if he tries to do that? Because the point of bishop e3, if white were to get a free chance to play it, would be to try to go bishop c5, trade the dark square bishops, and then land the knight in on d6. Because that's the thing that's stopping him from using the d6 square as my dark square bishop. But the drawback of bishop e3 is that I might just be able to take it and triple up his pawns. But I'm kind of concerned about moving this knight away from d5. I really like it on that square. So what to do? I'm leaning towards bishop a6 or a5. Bishop e7 would be a move trying to castle. I may not want to castle, though. You know, I might want to keep my king in the center for the time being. F5 I could think about playing, trying to drive away his knight. And if f5, e takes f6 en passant, well, then I take with my g-pawn, and I've at least knocked out that strong e-pawn that he has at his disposal. F5 is radical. I kind of like it, though, to be quite honest. F5, let's say knight d6 check, bishop takes d6, e takes d6. I can stick my king on d7 and blockade. It's probably not bad. Well, it's going to look kind of weird, but it might be a decent idea. Yeah, let's try it. Another factor that encourages me to make this move is the time differential. You know, we still have a 3-minute time advantage, not as big as it was a few minutes ago, but 3 minutes in a 15-minute game is significant. So if he takes... Oh, you know what? I missed something. Just when I opened this video talking about how sharp I was, or how sharp I expected myself to be, I go on and miss something. Okay, so the thing I missed here is that after e takes f6, g takes f6, he can actually just play knight takes f6 check. And when I take with my knight, he has bishop takes c6, and he's going to win my rook in the corner. My sense of danger deserted me on this last move. So, okay, so now that I've noticed that, do I have like an auxiliary plan in mind? Because if e takes f6, g takes f6, knight takes, king f7, he can play knight takes d5, and then whichever pawn I take with, he actually has rook takes d5, and it's a similar tactic. Crazily enough. Let me look at that line. So from the beginning here, e takes f6, en passant, g takes f6, knight takes f6 check, knight takes f6, or sorry, not knight takes f6 check for me, king f7 instead. Then he plays knight takes d5. Let's say I take with the e pawn, so e takes d5, rook takes d5, c takes d5, bishop takes d5. Let's say bishop e6. Then he takes the rook in the corner. Now, if I develop, though, let's say I play bishop g7, then I'm hitting that rook on, or that bishop on a8, and I'm maybe threatening c3. As weird as that seems. Ooh, actually, I think that might work for me. So let me run through this again. So g takes f6, knight takes f6 check, king f7, knight takes d5, e takes d5, rook takes d5. Then c takes d5, bishop takes d5 check, bishop e6, bishop takes a8, bishop g7, hitting the bishop. Let's say bishop e4 maybe. Then I'm thinking c3. Pawn c3. And I'm down a pawn at that point, but I really like my bishops. And if b takes c3, bishop takes c3, hitting the rook. And the important point is that if rook b1, I have bishop a2 at the end, and I think his rook is trapped. Okay, well, let's do it. I see some potential complicating factors along the way. Again, this e4 move coming up. First of all, he has to notice that knight takes f6 is possible here, which I think there's a good chance that he'll notice that. But even if he does, like say one line, knight takes f6 check, king f7, knight takes d5. If I take with the e-pawn, maybe e4 is decent. Now, but then at the very least I can play bishop e6. So let's not do that. Let's not speculate too much about that move. So props to him. He did notice the tactic. Now, if knight takes d5, do I take with the e or the c-pawn? I mean, I was saying e the whole time, but c-pawn does straighten out the pawns. If he takes on d5 with a rook, it doesn't matter which way I take. But if knight takes d5, e takes d5, e4, I guess I have bishop g4 still. Yeah, bishop g4 is a good move. And again, the point of that is to attack the rook with tempo. And if f3, I just drop the bishop back to e6. And it's a bit more comfortable than before for me because his bishop is blocked by his own pawn. So it wouldn't be attacking d5. All right, he's under 5 minutes now, so that plays to our advantage. Not happy I missed the knight takes f6 move. Probably should have thought about f5 a bit longer. But I was feeling a little feisty, a little loosey-goosey. And we'll see if he figures out that he can just take on d5. Otherwise, he'll just retreat his knight somewhere. But then I get bishop g7 in. Maybe I can attack b2. Technically, we're even material right now. This is the material count. You can see it. Because I won one pawn earlier, and he just gained it back with this knight takes f6 move. Okay, let's play this move kind of quickly. And we'll see if my calculation is right if he plays rook takes d5. So it's a somewhat difficult decision. Okay, he plays e4 instead. Maybe he didn't notice rook takes d5, either that or he didn't like it for some reason. Let's go ahead and play this move. I'm going to try to keep the pressure on him, on the clock. So we hit that rook, we gain a tempo. Now the question for him is where to put this rook, because he would like to keep it on the d file, attacking the pawn, but d2 is awkward, it blocks his bishop. And d4 also is a kind of undesirable square. Maybe I had bishop c5 in that case. So I'm not quite sure where he should put that piece. Maybe d1, but then I can play d4 if I want. Okay, so he just plays f3 instead. Do I play check or should I just leave that option open? I mean, if I don't play check, he might settle his bishop on e3. I'm not sure I like that. So maybe I should check and then drop the bishop back here. Yeah, I think I like that. Let's do that.
Check.
Developing move. We connect the rooks at the same time too, and I can play this bishop e6 move next. Yeah, so let's go here. I bet he'll play f4 because he needs to get this bishop out. He actually takes the pawn. Okay. Well, now bishop takes maybe. Bishop takes or pawn takes clearly, but pawn takes. My bishop is just looking like a tall pawn on that square. Yeah, let's take with the bishop. And here I would expect f4 or maybe a bishop move. Maybe like bishop g5 or something. Probably not bishop f4 because I think he wants to be able to play pawn f4. So, okay, so he does that. Now what about taking on g2 and then playing rook a d8? How do we feel about that? So take g2 check, he takes with the king, rook a d8. And it's kind of nice because his bishop has a hard time getting in the game. He can play bishop d2, but then I have simple moves like, let's say, rook h e8, threatening rook e2. I could also, if I want, play rook a d8 first, threatening bishop takes g2. Okay, well, let's do this to start. We're going to play it a little more forcing. I can pre-move that move. His move is forced. Bishop d2 is an awkward move to make, so he might not want to do it. But the problem is his alternatives are not great. I mean, it's either move the rook or take my rook, which cedes control of the d-file, and he still can't develop his bishop after that. So I think he'll play bishop d2. He does. All right, so rook he8 was one idea I had here. Threatening rook e2. Another idea is just to play rook d3. Just get the rook in and threaten to double up. Rook d3, I wonder if he can go rook c1, though. And then if rook hd1, play rook takes c4. But then I could just drop my bishop back somewhere. Oh, I take on d2 with check. Never mind. even better. Okay, let's throw this move in first. I just want to see how he reacts to it. Because if king f3, trying to control the e2 square, I have rook d3 check, which is bad news for him. Probably just losing, because then I double up on the next move. So I think he has to play king f1 now. So I'm just trying to throw up a little bit of a roadblock and play a good move before I decide how to proceed. He's at 2:15 now. Not much time. Yeah, see, this is an unfortunate square because I have this move. If he had gone to f1, rook d3 would not be coming with check is the thing. Now I'm going to be able to double up my rooks and hit this bishop on the next move. So I win a piece. Yeah. He was doing pretty well up till that point. I mean, he noticed on move 14, the knight takes f6 tactic, took advantage of my blunder, and maybe made a right decision with e4. I guess we'll see in the analysis. But for my part, I think f5 was clearly rushed. I should have looked a little bit longer. I mean, like I said, my sense of danger let me down on that one. So let's go back and have a look. So he played this gambit involving g3 against the Semi-Slav. It's getting a lot of play recently, even at the highest level. There's a game Kramnik versus Geary from earlier this year that you want to check out if you play this line for white or black. So one thing white can try here, by the way, is knight e5 right away, which I think was the course of the Kramnik-Geary game. So that is possible immediately. And some people say that black should therefore play knight bd7 first, which I have also played. Like sometimes I'll take on c4 first, sometimes I'll play knight bd7. I'm not sure there's much of a difference because white inevitably plays bishop g2 and then you take anyways if you start with knight bd7. But I thought I remembered reading in a Semi-Slav book that black should take here. So that's why I did it, but that's not a really good reason because I can't elucidate why knight bd7 or d takes c4 is more accurate. And in fact, the way my understanding is as of now, knight bd7 is more accurate to disallow this. So with that in mind, if you can't explain why a move should be played, but you know it's like recommended, you probably should not play the move even still if there's a decent alternative available. So I think I'll have to go look that up. But so I took on c4 and we got this position after b5. Then he played knight e5, so I don't know, maybe this is playable for white. If he can indeed, after this trade and then trade again, if he can indeed harass me before I get coordinated with moves like a4 and e4, then I can definitely see white's compensation. Let's go and have a look right here after the trade of knights. I'm just curious whether I should play, as in the game, queen takes d1 or knight d5 immediately. Probably both are playable. Oh, that's interesting. After knight d5 immediately, the computer for a second was giving knight e4 and then f5, similar to what I did in the game. Here that would be safer for black because knight takes f6 is defeated by queen takes f6, and he's not going to get at the c6 pawn. But that being said, the computer also likes the way I played. So how should I react after a4? I think b4 is appropriate. As I said, there's not a other really good way to support this. I think I mentioned the move rook b8, but there's several problems with that move. The simplest one being that after takes, he's opening up the rook on a7. Also, my d5 knight is going to have a hard time remaining defended because white is knocking out the c6 pawn. Likewise, a6 would be a typical mistake because after takes, I can't take back with my a pawn. My rook would hang. And if I take with a c pawn, then d5 is lacking key defenders. Oh, by the way, this is an illustration of the concept that, Dan Heisman, for instance, the national master and pretty prolific coach, he talks about counting a lot. Like I've noticed on his website and in some of the resources that he's created, he talks about counting attackers and defenders on certain squares. But this is a good example of why you can't just like strictly count attackers and defenders all the time. Because if you notice this knight on d5, it's only defended twice. It's defended by my e6 and c6 pawns, but it's actually attacked 3 times. His bishop, knight, and rook. But notice how in the game I didn't even like really look at him taking on d5 with the goal of just outright winning a pawn. And that's because if he takes twice, he's going to lose a piece, right? So like if he starts with, I don't know, knight takes, that's an even trade, knight for knight after I take back. But he would not play bishop takes here, just thinking that, he's coming out on top material-wise. That would just be silly. He's giving up a bishop for a pawn. So, you have to be aware, and this is kind of basic. I mean, those higher rated viewers out there might be kind of rolling your eyes at this, but it bears saying, I think. You can't just blindly count attackers and defenders. You have to count, or you have to consider the value of the defensive and attacking pieces too. That's why when you're attacking a square several times, usually you don't want to lead the attack, so to speak, with your higher value pieces. Like, let's say white wanted to bring a queen into the mix to attack d5. Well, you probably wouldn't want to have your queen like on d2 in front of your rook, because that would be the first piece to go as far as your major pieces if you were to try to initiate captures on that square. So just one thing that I kind of thought about in looking at this position. So knight d5, he played a4. I went b4. He moved the knight away. Okay, so here f5 is a mistake. I thought for a little while on this move too. Other moves I was looking at were like a5 or bishop a6. Maybe a5 is the way to go. And I was wondering if he could play bishop e3. It's kind of a weird-looking move, but the point is to pump the bishop into c5 and try to trade the dark square bishops in hopes of conquering the d6 square. Like, he'd love to play knight d6 check when I can't capture that knight. So how would this go? Like bishop a6, let's just say he proceeds with the plan. Castles queenside. Bishop takes f8. Rook h takes, knight d6, king c7. Okay, and in this case I have the c4 pawn, so at least he wasn't able to jump into d6 and then go take c4. Alright. Yeah, probably I should play like a5. I think that's a good move. It connects my pawns. Also, if I want to bring the bishop to a6, then the bishop will be behind the a-pawn rather than in front of it if I had played bishop a6 immediately. So I think I like that move. But instead I played f5, mistake, and he took en passant. I took in my g-pawn, and he alertly played knight takes f6. So the point is, if I take with my knight, then bishop takes c6, forks the king and the rook. He's going to go up material. He's winning a rook for that minor piece. Plus, he'll have, what, an extra pawn too? Yeah, extra pawn. So after knight takes, I played king f7. Now he took here. Yeah, this is a difficult psychological decision, I think, for white, because, if you got this position over the board and you're sitting there as white, you would almost certainly feel like your opponent had just missed something. I mean, if I'm playing king f7, that's kind of an admission that I missed knight takes f6 on the previous move. But so you might be tempted to try to quote-unquote punish that by continuing the active play. And I mentioned this line, rook takes d5. Point being that after c takes d5, then bishop takes d5 check. Again forks the king and the rook. But after bishop e6, bishop takes a8, I was looking at this bishop g7 move, lining up the bishop with that rook on a1 and also uncovering an attack on the a8 bishop. And the line that I was dictating to you guys was bishop e4 and now c3, trying to attack this. And it's very important that if b takes c3, bishop takes c3, rook b1, you see the material count, he's up 2 pawns, but after bishop a2, this rook is trapped. It's trapped in by my 2 bishops. And I think I'm going to gain the edge out of this. Because not only will it be equal material after the trap, but I'll have this protected past b pawn that's going to give him a lot of grief. He has like a 4 versus 1 majority in the center and on the king side, but it's not as relevant as my past b pawn. Also, like, my rook might quickly come to d1 if he's not careful. So this position is probably borderline losing for white. Maybe white can play something else after c3. I am threatening this, so rook b1 I think is the only other decent move. And then bishop a2, rook a1, retreat the bishop, and we have an unusual perpetual. So that's apparently how the game should end in the case of this line, if white takes on d5 again. Yeah, probably I shouldn't speculate with taking on b2 here, because he can play bishop takes b2, rook takes a2, and contrary to the last case, here I think white has a good chance of being able to blockade this b pawn, because I don't have a light square bishop, white does. So he can blockade the b3 or b1 squares. And then his 2-pawn advantage might persist at the endgame, and you can see why the engine likes white here. But long story short, I mean, I think he maybe made the right call in not taking. That is, unless there's nothing better than rook takes d5. I don't know. I don't know if I'd want to go into that line for white. I'd only go into the line with rook takes d5 if I saw that after c3 in that variation, I had rook b1, and that the best black has is a perpetual. Otherwise, I would not play this move. So he played e4, which I kind of speculated maybe he should have played, but then bishop g4 seems like a good reply. Here,
check.
we give a check. Yeah, like I said, his rook has a hard time finding a useful square because d2 and d4 both expose him to attacks from my dark square bishop, and d2 is just flat out awkward, blocking his own bishop. Maybe rook e1? I don't know. Maybe this move's okay. Then the engine suggests bishop g7. Why is that? So if take, rook a e8, offering a rook trade, trying to get to his back rank. And I suppose if this bishop moves, trying to protect the rook a couple times, then b2 is hanging. I can play c5, defending the pawn here, and he's going to have trouble with this, even though I'm down a pawn at present. The computer thinks this is close to winning for black. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, once I get this bishop on the dark square diagonal, it's a powerful piece. It attacks b2, and it helps escort my c-pawn up the board. Well, I guess in that case, I mean, maybe way back here, even after king f7, maybe white should not take. I know the computer was suggesting like knight e4 or knight h5, I see it's now suggesting. So maybe taking and trying to exploit my stronghold on d5 is not the way to go. It's a lot to figure out, though, in 5 minutes. I mean, I can sympathize with his plight here. He plays a few natural moves and even wins back his pawn, but then he ends up in a worse position. Yeah, I thought f4 should be played now. I did not like his capture on d5. I think that is a mistake. Although, maybe there's no good moves here. But if f4, I thought at least then he'd liberate this bishop and be threatening to take here. However, I can take this way. Bishop takes, rook a d8, offer a trade. Okay, this is kind of similar to the game, I suppose. What happens if bishop d2, bishop g4? The bishop makes a reappearance on this square, attacking his rook. And if his rook moves, he hangs his bishop on d2. All right, so it's tough for white. Maybe I can't be too harsh on him then. So he took on d5. I took with the bishop. Yeah, it's debatable which is better, bishop takes or pawn takes. Bishop takes seemed like the way to keep the initiative, so that's why I played it. And I'm just opposing his bishop on g2, so if he plays f4, I won't have to worry about my center or him having a good piece attacking like d5, c6. He played f4. Check. I took. Maybe rook a d8 is a little bit stronger. Rook a d8. What if bishop d2 now? Rook h e8, threatening to take and then bring the rook into e2 like the game. I think bishop takes g2 is fine, but I could see why rook a d8 might be a little bit more accurate. If he trades on d5, check. I think we're happy to take with our pawn and obtain a nice pawn roller. I'm going to play d4 and hopefully c3 soon. And try to score a touchdown with one of those pawns eventually.
Check.
So here, rook a d8. And if he trades the rooks, his issue is that the bishop has a hard time developing because it can't go to d2. That's covered by the rook. He also can't go to e3 because that bishop takes e3. So my rook will just penetrate to d1, and I think it's all but over, even though the material's equal. It's just he didn't get his pieces out. So hence he played rook d2, and I threw in rook h e8 because I thought it was trickier, but I could also like move my rook up the board in a bid to double right away. Like I thought about rook d3, for instance, trying to get ready to double, and he probably should play bishop e1 and offer a rook trade, because if he goes here trying to counterattack, I think I just have rook h d8, rook takes, and then a bishop move. Or no, sorry, check. Rook takes d2. I haven't mentioned that in the game. I have this move with check, so I don't even have to bother moving my bishop right away. I'll just go up a piece. So rook a d8, bishop d2, rook here. Yeah, and king f1 I think is now forced. He's got to cover the e2 square, but he can't allow this rook to come in with tempo. I probably would have still played rook d3, but maybe white maintains some defensive chances. It's pretty unpleasant, though. What if bishop e1 now? Rook f3 check, king here, rook b3. Yeah, I did see in some cases that the rook can come here and attack b2. It's a highly unpleasant position for white to hold. Rook d2, bishop e3. Yeah, black's coordination is superior, and I think my queenside pawn mass, the 4 versus 2 I have, is much more dangerous than white's 3 versus 1. These pawns, like the g and the f pawns, need about 5 more moves before they become a true threat. Whereas these pawns can get on white right away, especially if the b2 pawn is lost. Then he's got to be winning one of my c or b pawns, or he's toast. So it might be losing anyways, but king f3 check. Accelerates the defeat. Rook d3 check, and then I gain time to double up the rooks and attack the bishop. And we just are winning a piece outright, since if the bishop moves, he would lose a full rook. Not enough defenders one extra attacker for me. So I think I played all right, aside from the f5 move. That's the one mistake I made. Otherwise, my play was good, I think. And for him, maybe the early knight e5, theoretically speaking, is not the best. So I'll move 8 right here, knight e5. Also, I think probably he could have improved right around here. But it's tough. Like I said, his time was dwindling, and there's a temptation to take on d5, especially and try to follow up with rook takes d5. But we saw that line leads to a draw with best play. I don't know, maybe he should go for that line if he sees it, but he probably just missed something along the way in this variation. Maybe he just flat out missed rook takes d5. That's a tempting move. It looks like you're just going to win a pawn or even 2 pawns if black takes, but in fact, black is fine after that. All right, hope you guys enjoyed this game. I'll be back tomorrow with another video. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.